Recording is started. Let's get started. Go ahead, Ernie. Do you want to review the format first?
All right. The format is that we will do the national anthem. We will introduce the program. We will introduce the people who sponsor this, and then we will have 15 minutes by Ryan or whatever he needs to, if it's 10 minutes, it's 15 minutes. And then you and I, Frank, will interrupt at that point and start a conversation with Ryan and his partner. And then we will close at the end. I just wanted to review some of the people that we have coming up and meetings coming up. We have Senator Brooks. We have uh, Jim Jordan from the Maglev Company, very knowledgeable guy. He was a logistics high officer in the military, and he knows the maglev system inside out and backwards. So he's going to be an interesting. We have Congress person. Uh, uh, I'm trying to think. I'm losing it, man. But we're going to have the congressperson from Queen from Nassau, and she will
Kathleen
be
Rice, right?
Kathleen Rice. Thank you, Frank. And so we do have great programs coming up. Um, I think might want to start with the anthem, Frank.
Okay, doing that now.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave, home of the brave.
What group was that, Frank?
Their name is Backtrack.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Okay, so we should be back to cameras, and if the I'm going to allow you guys. Can you unmute yourselves, Ryan and Mike? I don't know if you can. Yes, you can. Great. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I had read something that Ryan was going to be doing, and I thought it would be an interesting program for us. You have a pretty good background in this, don't you, Ryan?
Yeah. Would you like me to introduce myself a little bit, or?
Yes, I would, a little bit, and then you could go ahead and talk about the program.
That'd be great. So yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Ernie and Frank and the Limba Network for having us on today. Really excited to be having this conversation. I know we've also been outreaching to a lot of folks on this call because we're actually having a kind of a deeper dive around this issue on Monday. I'm putting the link for that in the chat. So we're planning to, with a really great list of speakers from national and regional experts who have, been engaged in conversations around public power and municipalization fights to do a kind of deeper dive and offer a very particular governance model that we're going to be offering on Monday. We'll talk a little bit about it here today, but just wanted to note and name, because I see a couple people that we've reached out to just make sure there was an understandable conflation of the different events. So if you're left wanting more after this conversation, I really encourage you all to join us on Monday. We'll have 90 minutes to do a deeper dive presentation with a different constituency of speakers. But for today's purposes, let me first introduce myself. My name is Ryan Madden. I am the sustainability organizer for the Long Island Progressive Coalition, where over the last 5.5 years, I have led our climate justice and energy democracy campaigns. Along with the statewide coalition New Yorker News, we were instrumental in passing what culminated in 2019 as the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is our legally codified climate emissions reduction goals and equity mandates to ensure the wholesale transition of New York's economy off of fossil fuels. I've been doing climate and energy work for almost a decade, doing direct project implementation of statewide energy efficiency programs, doing advocacy and organizing at the UN level around the climate negotiations, and again have done worked over the course of
You
years.
certainly seem to have a pretty good handle on the issue there from that point of view. But the municipal power is something that I looked into a long time ago.
Sure.
There were
this is not a new issue. Yeah.
It's no, oh, and the Nashville Electric is the president at the time was a friend of mine, and I went down to Nashville and I found out they don't make $1 million a year being a president of a municipal power company. They get paid in the terms of a civil servant, and which could be quite a bit of money, but it's not $1 million, you know. I think he was paid $180,000 a year. So the whole structure of the executives of that particular electric company was reasonable. So, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you at this point.
No, please. Thank you. Yeah. And so, what we see, there are a couple of lines of arguments, right, around our fight for full public power, right? The Long Island Power Authority is a public utility that has operated under a kind of a quasi-private public model ever since the takeover of the Long Island Lighting Company around the battle over the nuclear shore and power plant, which is one of the first campaigns actually that the Long Island Progressive Coalition was engaged with. So, our history here is long, and I know there are folks on this call who were a part of that precede my time. So I also want to acknowledge the kind of the paths laid for a lot of the efforts that lead us to this moment today. And so that's why really our
what are the encumbrances for you to move from what we have now to a municipal structure? What are the impediments?
I think the only impediment is just the kind of inertia that's been behind not doing this. So, like, when again we went from quasi public-private partnership with Keyspan to National Grid to PSE&G, and only now, actually based on LIPA's own findings in their adoption analysis of how much money could be saved by bringing everything in-house, and what we know nationally and locally about the lower rates that public power utilities offer, how more resilient they are, how much more innovative they are, and how much more on customer satisfaction rates that they're better than for-profit utilities.
Well, there's two other models that I want you to think about. There's one is the one that the insurance companies called the mutuals. So where everybody who pays a bill is owner of the company, or at least being able to vote on who is running the company. The other one is cooperative. And are those different?
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of different models that can be explored and that offer more democratic participation or more, stakeholder oversight. That's one of the things that we're offering here is a kind of broadened partnership with Long Island institutions in order to share the workload of the Long Island Power Authority. And so we see step one as the commitment to a full municipalization, right? So bringing everything in-house, having it be a fully publicly run, managed, and operated utility that expands its network of partnerships with like Long Island universities, community organizations, labor organizations in the actual decision making, policy making, and and then there are different structures to explore there, or different models for electing the board, or different running of districts, or having appointments that are constituency led. So we're kind of exploring a pluralistic approach here, and at the end of the day, what first needs to happen is the choice needs to be made by the LIPA Board of Trustees to endeavor in this reimagination by committing to full municipalization, and then working with community partners, labor partners, business partners in this reimagination. And so it's not just about switching the labels from PSENG to LIPA and keeping everything as is, but actually creating new structures of participatory governance with different partners so that everyone who wants to have a stake in the conversation gets to in ways that have not existed before. And we see the need to municipalize as a first necessary step to make that change in the reimagination. So I know there's been a little.
What effect would the change be on some very important people? I see a guy, Mike Ballas is here, so he's providing solar energy and things like that. And you have people like unions. How I mean, would you adopt the unions that you have, or would you put them into a different category?
Right. So, and hey, Mike. Mike and I have worked on some solar projects together. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few things here. Like, what we're offering, like, one, there's just like general cost savings that have been noted by LIPA themselves in the cost analysis of tens of millions of dollars that wouldn't be going to PSENG management fees. And I think by 2030 something, collectively, it's like almost $1 billion. And that's money that can be invested in new programs and like policies and priorities that could be determined by stakeholders that you've just named here, if we decide to go down a route where we're creating new structures to do that. And that's what we want. We want workers to have a greater say in the governance and operations, not just doing the line work, but like, are there particular policies that are not being met currently? Are there ways that like they want to have, like a workers council for like particularly like implementation strategies or the development of other policies? And, they're ratepayers and consumers too. They live in community. Do they want a community solar array in their backyard? Like, what support do they need in order to foster that? Like, the whole idea here is to open up the breadth of stakeholder engagement in helping to shape this future, so that's not just on one utility, but that we're making the decision to municipalize, bring it under a public power model, take the profit motive out of the equation, and then use what we're paying right now, again, exorbitant management fees, to make different decisions about how we want to do things, especially now that we have.
I mentioned to you, Ryan, is acquisition. Now, as I understand it, LIPA already owns all the poles and distribution. They don't own anything in generation. They'd still have to buy that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that's still currently the situation. Obviously, we're in a time where fossil fuel infrastructure is going to be continually declining, again, as we have codified legal mandates to move to 100% renewable or zero carbon energy, 100% by 2040 in the electricity sector, and additional greenhouse gas emission mandates under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So yeah, again, that's another question that we get to have in a more, I think, nuanced and democratic way when we municipalize and have a decision of like, does LIPA want to own generating assets? Does it want to continue its contracting model with like the different offshore wind projects that are coming online, mega scale, solar initiatives? So Again, there are a lot of questions and complexities in this, and we think we're all better served in the future, whether under a public power model, where there are more participatory
I want you to
opportunities.
clearly either agree with what I had just said about ownership or refute it if it's wrong. We do own all the distribution mechanism, right? As LIPA.
Yeah, lines and poles.
Okay. So that's one expense you won't have to undertake in making a municipality. You already own it.
Correct.
Okay. So the only thing, and you're probably not going into generation. You'll have to get that from either solar or, other kinds of power purchases, right?
Yeah, and again, there's megawatt scale, utility scale offshore winds across the board. There's the 9,000 megawatt commitment by New York State that was codified again under CLCPA. A lot of that is going to be off the shores of Long Island. There's already that series of conversations happening at that level. But yeah, I don't know. I know there's been a little bit of a meandering conversation. I don't know, Michael, if you have anything that you want to weigh in particular here on some of the things that have been named or addressed.
Well, just on the cost and the hindrances, according to LIPA's own report, they're right. There aren't any major purchases or seizings of property and so on, like as if you were municipalizing Con Ed, right? Or like what California's dealing with in PG&E. There's only cost savings that arise from the transfer of the public-private model to the fully municipal model. And that's because your management costs go down. As you noted, the salaries aren't in the 7 figures range. And then there's also some savings you have when you're fully public in terms of your debt financing and your borrowing costs and things like that.
So let me ask Mike.
Can you explain, Ryan or Mike, who would be making the decision to go forth with this kind of a change? That's not clear to me.
So,
oh no, please, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, should I introduce first or just go into it?
Sure, yes, please.
Introduce yourself, Michael.
Okay, yeah, so just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm a professor at Brooklyn College, CUNY, in urban sustainabilities, earth environmental science, and in philosophy, believe it or not. I have sort of two backgrounds that I bring to this particular conversation and possibility here on Long Island. One is I work with the Science and Resilience Institute, which is based at CUNY and works in Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island. And so I work with all the climate scientists every day, helping communities and businesses and local government to prepare for the changes coming, climate change. And Texas was mentioned earlier, and we can have a brief noting maybe of Texas's relevance in a second.
Please do.
The other is I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit called the Participatory Budgeting Project. And we work in over 25 cities to help local governments have better relationships with their community over the budget. And that's a lot of fun and that's a lot of headaches, but it ends up improving the relationship that communities have with government. So I've worked with city agencies, government agencies, counties. In my work with the Science and Resilience Institute, I deal with Port Authority, US Army Corps, state, federal parks. So I'm used to, and I actually love, this is just one of my perverse things, I love dealing with all the levels of bureaucracies. I'm in the Professional Staff Congress Union, AFT, have a lot of union partners that I talk to about this stuff. So that's the kind of lens I bring to this, the climate sustainability, resilience lens, as well as the accountability and transparency and the participation that we want from multiple stakeholders in this kind of conversation. In terms of, I'm sorry, the question was on—
Who would make the decision? How would this go
right.
forward?
Just in terms of the state, right? So LIPA, the board makes the decision, and then there would have to be state legislation to bring forth the transformation. If
You
they
get any pushback on that, Mike?
at the state level,
Yeah.
I don't, Ryan, what do you think? I mean, I don't think we've had pushback at the state level. I think people are looking at what's the real possibility and what would it look like right now. And so we're really trying to move that forward, that conversation based upon, and I do research on how other places have done it, across the US and across the world, honestly. So Ryan, what would you say about the state situation right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some manners it's like premature, right? Because like ultimately right now what's happening is more in the regulatory and utility side of things. So, after Tropical Storm Isaias, there was the kind of state-led investigation process overseen by the Department of Public Service, which did a bunch of oversight hearings that is seemed to be moving forward in like Con Ed territory with like fines for their negligence. And some of the aftermath of the investigations with PSE&G and seeing their systems failures, the technological failures, the communication failures, the perceived hiding of information, and a lot of the perceived failures have led to this like situation where the LIPA board is now saying, okay, what are our options to move forward? And they originally laid out 4, and now they're really between 2. Do we renegotiate a contract with PSE&G on more favorable terms? I think they've set them a term sheet of like 100 different recommendations. They're in a back and forth exchange. Or do we bring everything in-house, fully commit to municipalization, and do the proper, undertake the proper transition period?
How can
which
you
is a
bring
period-
everything in-house if you don't own the means of production?
Because
Yeah.
right now PSE&G is doing the grid maintenance and line work that could be underdone under the purview of LIPA. So we're just taking out the middleman, and the generation stuff is deeply related but separate from what we're talking about.
Oh, I see. So you got 2 separate contracts there, apparently. One is to service the lines and the other one is to provide the power for the lines.
Right, and there are major power plants that are owned by private companies, all of them in the fossil fuel sector. Obviously, a lot of offshore wind projects are coming online. And again, we are legally required to move away from fossil fuels in New York State. So that becomes a different question. And again, the question of like, should LIPA own generating assets and develop renewables is something that is like part of this conversation. If we want it to be a part of this conversation, that could be a part of this conversation. If
And
we
it
had
doesn't
more-
have to be immediate either.
Right.
In other words, you can make the transition and then decide that 10 years down the road that you want to own manufacturing facilities to manufacture your own power.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just trying to get all the concepts in my head straight because it's really a complicated thing you're on here. And I just wanted to see how any of that could work out. And so, what feelings do you get from the LIPA board? Are they telling you anything?
Well, I think we've seen in the last couple LIPA board meetings, and I know folks here are really clued in already. But on February 24th at 11 a.m. is the next LIPA board meeting. And they've stated that they want to make a decision about whether or not to renegotiate the contract or fully municipalize by the end of March. So obviously the next couple of meetings are super crucial. So I'm putting in a link for the registration for on the LIPA website if folks want to attend on the 24th and perhaps provide testimony, if hopefully in support of municipalization as we see it. But what we're hearing is an incredible lack of distrust, hurt, and frustration with PSE&G and their conduct before, during, and after the tropical storm. And honestly, based on the adoptions analysis that they offered with these kind of 4 different pathways, they made the case for themselves about why going the municipal route makes the most sense. It is the most cost effective. It opens up resources to invest in kind of like more innovative ways of spending our money. It gets rid of the middleman, and it from our standpoint opens up the opportunity again for more participatory structures here under a public governance model. So we've Matthew Cordero, a trustee, has publicly spoken in favor of public power for some time, but otherwise the conversations have really sat with the dissatisfaction with PSE&G, and so we'd love to hear more publicly what the trustees are thinking. But I think right now they're in a like listening mode to like really understand what the best kind of like pathway forward is, which is why we're really excited. Again, I'll reshare the link for our forum on Monday, is that we know a couple of trustees and LIPA staff planning to attend that, where again, we're going to be going through with folks like Eleanor Stein, who worked at the New York State Public Service Commission for 20 years, as one of our presenters, who's an advocate for public power. Johanna Bazua from the Democracy Collaborative, who has on the national level, focused on public utilities across the nation and seen how successful they are. Obviously, Michael Menser will be there. And so, we think, they're in listening mode. And so we're really glad that they're going to be coming to the forum that we're dedicating to advance our case for public power as they continue in their listening mode. But from a financial standpoint, they've already made the case for themselves that municipalization is the most cost-effective way to go, and has benefits around customer reliability, as we've seen in other parts of the state. So, we hope that, as they're listening, that dissatisfaction with PSE&G is pushing them towards the want to fully municipalize. And we hope, in conversations like this on Monday and in ongoing, dialogue over the next couple of weeks, that they ultimately do make this decision and see in this an opportunity to reimagine the structure of the utility and have new partners as we move forward. Because I think really in the era of the climate crisis, we have to rethink the logic of our political, social, economic systems and the way that we govern things. Not just at like who's elected and who's not, but like how we collectively as a society work together around these things. Because again, the urgency of the climate crisis necessitates that we don't continue in similar logic. So we see public power as a really necessary, but ultimately insufficient, right? But a necessary step towards that kind of restructuring of how we want to work together as a society to address this problem that is only going to get worse over time.
Ryan, you emphasized
Hold on,
that you
Ernie.
would like to see, I wanted to ask this question.
Okay.
You wanted to see more of wind power, more solar power. That requires storage. How are we in that realm? Do we have the necessary storage, or do we know how to make the necessary storage? I have a guest coming on from Magna, who has a storage system that works very efficiently. It's around 93% of what you put in, you get back out. So, which is better than the one from waterfalls, the falling water. But have you considered that? And do you have it?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, this is a key piece for our energy future, and part of the mandates under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is a certain threshold of battery storage over time to meet our energy demand, especially as we electrify things in the heating system. We're gonna need more electrical production and therefore storage. So I actually don't know the figures around LIPA's or the landscape of battery storage on Long Island. There are people on here who know more than I do on that realm. But it's more of those conversations are actually happening in New York City around some of the peaker plants. So the fight is to decommission those peaker plants and transition them to battery storage fields. So similar conversations could happen on Long Island because we have our own peaker plants and fossil fuel production that will need to go offline. So what do we want to do with those sites? They may be prime sites for storage projects. So again,
Frank, you wanted to say something.
Well, what I wanted to do was explain that we're right at the 9:30 point, the midpoint, and I wanted to make sure that everybody who's participating knows that they can ask questions, but we can't just open everybody's microphone. Instead, there's a chat window. If you've never used it, there's a way to chat to me or the whole group, and you can either ask the question in chat, or you can ask to be unmuted, and then I can unmute you and you can ask your own question. We have a couple of questions already, and I'm going to get into them right now. Who would pay, this comes from Bill Miller, who would pay the actual cost of municipalization? And then how would assets be transferred?
So we save money with municipalization. We reduce costs. That's kind of the amazing thing about this particular case, because our management costs go down and some of our other financial costs go down. And then we can also make investments for further conservation, efficiency, and so on. So there's no, and this is, I really appreciate these questions, because when we say fully take over, we need to be more careful in that language, because we're not taking on generation. We're not purchasing all those assets. We're fully taking over what PSEG does. We're fully taking over what PSEG does
Management.
in terms of the management of the grid. So appreciate that. And it gets cheaper. I mean, you know, it's almost too easy, this argument on a certain level. Some of this stuff is very complex and other parts you're like, really? Yeah.
So this next question speaks to the property taxes that LIPA is currently paying, and how would those revenues be represented in this model?
Frank, we should be identifying the person who asked
Oh,
the
I'm
question.
sorry. Well, it says Richard's iPhone. So for that particular one, I don't know who that was other than his first name.
Right. So on the pilots and the property taxes, so this is where our model, as Ryan was saying earlier, what we need here is a better process to adjudicate these kinds of conflicts. And certainly the taxes and the pilots, the payments in lieu of taxes, if it's fully public, is something that there's been a lot of dissatisfaction about the way that that's handled, the kind of negotiations that go into that, the lack of transparency, and the lack of public participation in a kind of way that you know what's going on. There was a great long essay and Newsday about this a few weeks ago, just on this aspect. So in our model, we will mandate, one of the things is we want to change how the board operates, right? We want to make sure the board has a member, it could be a non-voting member, that's in charge of public engagement and convening the public. And not just having the board do it, but partnering with organizations such as universities. SUNY has this New York Energy Policy Institute that works on things like storage and solar fuels and so on. There could be partnerships to help with convening the public, with getting input, with having councils and assemblies and meetings to be able to have, to hear the voices here in a regularized way. So we need to change the process on how this happens. It can't be these backdoor negotiations where, you know, people don't know what's going on. And then also you have to do it in all these different cases, right? Because there's no standard form. So you do it here, you do it this town here, you do it Northport here, you do it out east here, you go all over the Long Island. And it seems arbitrary and random every time you settle one of these things.
So there's no direct answer to that other than that it would be worked out in a more democratic fashion.
You have to change the process. You can't, I couldn't say, oh, we're going to do it this way, right? That would be completely inappropriate for, you know, us to say this is how it gets solved. We have to bring in folks and mandate that the board operate in a different way to be able to adjudicate this.
So the next question from Lynn Allen Nielsen at Nielsen Consulting and Desktop Solutions: what can ordinary citizens do to advocate? Who should they call?
That is a great question. So one of the things that I can do is share a toolkit that we have developed where we, you know, make recommendations for, obviously, I mean, we're plugging our LIPA Reimagined forum on Monday, but there's delivering testimony at the Long Island Power Authority board meetings. You can sign on to our Reimagine statement as the Long Island Metro Business Action Group did. We actually have a specific hotline. Hold on, sorry. Let me just bring this up. Because obviously, you know, Governor Cuomo has a role and stake in here. So we've created a hotline this week to make calls directly to Governor Cuomo. And then you can also just, you know, join the kind of core group of people who have been organizing around this by emailing me. And obviously, again, the next couple of months are really the kind of like critical threshold points for this. But some of the stuff that we've identified in this like university partnership model is something that could exist for, you know, even if the municipalization route isn't explored, it's just from our standpoint, not as ideal. But, you know, this is an ongoing issue of how we govern our kind of commons here in the era of climate change. So, you know, we'll be here on the ground doing a bunch of different things related
Ryan,
to this.
do I have your permission to publicly post the same information on the LIMBA website? Because I'll be posting the video of this meeting, so I could include these links if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Next question comes from Patrick. Are there any examples of municipally operated power in New York State?
I'll have Michael speak to the particulars of that, but I will just put in a link right here for the New York Association of Public Power, because yes, across New York State, there are dozens of municipal and cooperatively run utilities, including on Long Island, in Greenport, Rockville Center, and Freeport. but I'll have Michael answer in more detail.
Yeah, I mean, there are dozens. There's a state public power association, as Ryan just mentioned. There are 3 on Long Island that are small, and only one really generates its own power. The other purchases from the New York Power Authority. The New York Power Authority, NYPA, is a fully public authority. It's in the transmission game as well. It's got those long lines that come onto the island, and they manage a lot of the hydro, the Niagara Falls and the hydro. So, and there's a very good record in terms of cost and reliability with the public owned. And there's also a few cooperative owned. I think that was a question in the beginning, where there's cooperatives in some smaller towns across the state. So yeah, and there's a lot of examples across the state. NYPA's being the biggest. NYPA's one of the largest power authorities in the United States. And so there's many examples locally and across the United States of public power serving constituents well for many decades.
So I have a question from Ron Golmi, who says that he believes there's a 20% tax advantage that LIPA has as an authority, and won't that be lost with municipalization? Do you have an economic analysis that can be shared?
In terms of LIPA not paying the taxes that PSEG would pay?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Ron, would you like me to unmute you? I'm going to allow you to do that because it seems like we have a follow-up question that I can't answer here. I'm trying to find your name. Sorry. Where is he?
So I think the quick sorry, go ahead.
But I don't. He might have had to leave because I don't see his name here.
I think he's here.
He is. Maybe it's my mistake. There he is. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Frank. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Well, thanks to Ryan and Mike for the presentation. No, Tom Falcone had provided an update about 2 weeks ago, and he mentioned something, and I might have this wrong. Mike Deering is on this call. He would know this a lot better than I would know if he has the opportunity to interject. But there's something about LIPA as an authority. When they raise funds, they save about 20% on taxes. That's what I was referring to. I wasn't referring to property taxes. I was referring to how they're able to raise tax-free financing, I believe it is. Mike, if you don't mind, if you
I
can.
did ask. Here, Mike's unmuted, right, Mike?
Yeah, I am. So Ron, yeah, we are able as a municipal authority to borrow money at significantly lower interest rates than a private corporation. The other side of it is also as a public authority, we have no investors, we have no shareholders. So all of the funds that our ratepayers, pay for their service goes directly back into providing better and more reliable service. So there's a number of benefits there, but the point that you raised is we do get significantly lower interest rates on our capital borrowing.
So would that be similar or eligible as a municipal entity or not?
Sure, we have that capability now, and whatever structure whatever the utility restructure is going forward, whether it's a renegotiated contract, I know we're talking about municipalization here, we will continue to have that same benefit. We're not talking about privatizing the utility. And if we were to privatize the utility, that benefit, along with a number of others, would be lost.
Right, thank you. And there's also federal assistance from FEMA and others that a public authority is available to it, which is the current situation. So, right, there are a number of cost-saving aspects to the current public authority and to full municipalization continues.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's a really important point. The opportunity to get FEMA grants. We've gotten about 700, I think it's in excess of $700 million as a result of the damage that was done in the past storms. And we would lose that if we did go to a privatized model.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
So the next question from John Hill: solar power, wind power. Who's going to pay for all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few answers to that. One is like, what does that exactly mean, right? Like, we're already paying for the damage from like the fossil fuel economy and lives lost and healthcare costs in increased storms, like fossil fuel subsidies for aging out power plants that all could be reconverted to subsidies in renewables. Like, there's just so many different ways that if we like changed how we like think about and answer that question, that it would be pretty simple. One thing that we're particularly working on to note, in addition to that kind of like, well, we're already subsidizing all of these other things, we could be doing it differently, which is outside of this conversation, that I'm happy to come and speak to this group about in the future, is our push at the statewide level with New Yorker News to pass the Climate and Community Investment Act, which would institute a fee on greenhouse gas emissions and co-pollutants that would raise $15 billion annually. And part of that revenue would be specifically dedicated to large-scale offshore wind and solar. So that's my short-term answer. And there's actually a group called Business Forward that is circulating a sign-on in support of this, which I just dropped into the chat. I'm also happy to follow up with anyone else if they have questions about that particular.
Ryan, you have no plans on buying wind power facilities. You'll probably do contracts with them. Is that the idea?
Under the current system, yeah. And to respond to the comment, not only was that a value judgment, it was also a proposal for a $15 billion revenue generator. So I would argue that I very much did answer that question. Mike,
Yeah,
I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah. Just so energy infrastructure could be funded by all kinds of different sources. There could be private investment, there could be private funds. You could make it come out of ratepayers' contributions. You could make it come out of taxes. There's public banks, there's private banks. There's been interest in an infrastructure bank in New York State to help fund these kinds of projects as you just go through the general upgrades of infrastructure. I got a new gas line last year that I didn't need hooked up. I paid for that, unfortunately. I didn't have a choice about that from a company I'm not going to mention right now. So there's multiple ways of financing these things. There's public and private sources. There's for-profit and nonprofit ways, and they're all in the mix. The Nature Conservancy is going to release its solar roadmap pretty soon. That's super exciting because that shows the ways in which a lot of solar can be added. And remember, you add solar and you got the storage there, then you increase your resilience and your reliability. It's not just about your energy, helps you maintain critical services during events. I know the Texas question lurks, I'll wait for it.
Yes, actually, that is the next question. And I want to make sure that we leave ourselves time to speak about the topical situation in Texas. And the specific question here in the chat was, are there lessons for New York to be learned from Texas? That was from A. Vitters.
Okay, thank you. So I've lived in New York, for 30 years. I grew up in the South though. And my brother was born in Texas, lived in Louisiana, Kentucky, Alabama. I've been in a dozen hurricanes in my life. I got friends down in Texas, so this is the ultimate nightmare, right? For a grid is to have this catastrophic failure. The failure in Texas is not because the lines went down. That's what we usually have, right? The lines go down. Sometimes the plants go down. It's not a distribution or transmission problem. This was a lack of supply to meet the incredible increase in demand because it isn't normally in the single digits in Texas. You get your ice storms, but you don't have it this cold. The operator of the grid did not add the supply that they should have added the week before. They knew it was coming. And we'll see how this plays out. In New York State, that we have the New York Independent Service Operator. So their independent service operator really, really screwed up. Then the weather also knocked a lot of stuff online. The wind was they don't use a lot of wind in the winter in Texas. They don't plan for that. So they had a reactor go down because of a sensor break. They had a lot of water pipes freeze, and they had a variety of grid damage. But it was primarily the supply just went up so much because people turn on their heaters that they don't normally do. So that's very different. We wouldn't have a situation like that, right? Where the supply is going to increase hundreds of % in an event. What we fear, of course, is an icing event, a large scale icing event, or a real large scale snow event that knocks out critical infrastructure. What can we learn? If you don't have a transparent planning process with the experts and with the relevant public stakeholders, you are negligent in the 21st century. This, unprecedented. How many people were sick of the word unprecedented in the last couple of years? Right? I mean, that's the new regime. Unprecedented is the new regime. We saw our unprecedented with Sandy. Are we going to get another Sandy? Probably not. It was a very unique beast. Are we going to get another Isaias? Highly likely, right? That's not unusual. We know certain types of events are likely to happen again. So we need a planning process, which is doing its pre-planning prep, and PSEG did a terrible job on that. PSEG did a terrible job. Their communications was not ready. Just the communication system wasn't ready. And then you need planning for emergency response. I work on this in the city all the time. I mean, where's the emergency response plan here, right? Things are going to happen. I mean, you can't have a perfect grid. What's your response? And in Texas, when you have this kind of catastrophic electric failure, they have a catastrophic water failure, and they're going to be dealing with the water issue for several days, unfortunately, in some places for weeks. So this isn't just about keeping the lights on. This is also about critical infrastructure. And even with this IES, we heard the Cold Spring Laboratory went down for a week. They do COVID research. How is that possible, right? Much less all the, I was here for Sandy and here for IES and all that. So that's the real key thing to learn from Texas, and just being able to have a much more public planning process, so that and also so the towns and the municipalities and the counties are involved as well.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to try to get to all the questions in the chat. Can you give us an example of who would have the expertise to replace PSEG in a municipal environment? For example, billing infrastructure, meters, wires, services, emergencies, etc.
So in the municipalization model, the LIPA would hire additional managers to have the in-house expertise that PSEG does with respect to management of operations as just described.
So it could be the very same people that are doing it now, but under a different management model.
Would it be the same people?
It could be. I mean, I think this question presupposes that everybody gets fired and you have to go find new people to do their jobs.
So the line workers would be added to LIPA. It's not clear that the management, and given the performance of the IT and their high salaries, that you would add those management people. That would, I think, be unlikely, also because there would be a different structure to the management operation.
So certainly there would be some change, but not necessarily at the line level.
No, not at the line level. No, that would be added.
I think that's the question, was about meters and wire services. Again, I think the question presupposes that through manipulation, everybody's going to get fired first thing. But that's not the case.
So the unit that does that.
Frank?
Yes.
If you don't mind. And again, I'm not trying to speak for Tom Falcone, and I never could, but in his meeting that he held and hosted on this topic 2 weeks ago, he made a statement that said all PSEG employees would not lose their jobs. They would carry over. Now, of course, the high executive level personnel, I'm sure that would not apply to. And some of the issues that he talked about stem from the fact that Tom Eichhorn, the president of PSEG Long Island, answers to someone in New Jersey, and they want autonomy. They want people that can make decisions on their own without answering to someone in New Jersey. They want someone in Long Island with authority to make decisions. But he did make a statement that they were very happy with, quote unquote, the workers, and people would have their jobs.
Thank you.
With the same level of union protection and everything else, Ron, because that's
Yes.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the union would carry over.
Yeah, there's a
So you-
successor clause in the contract with the bylaws of LIPA, so that the same
Yeah, as a matter
contract.
of
would apply.
fact, for everyone's edification, local 1049, which is the IBEW international local chapter, when National Grid lost the contract, all National Grid employees and all PSEG employees were in local 1049, the same union. When National Grid lost the contract, they separated and went electric and gas. So there's actually now National Grid's union is separate from PSEG employees. So that union would just carry forward to whoever is doing the work. Now, under municipalization, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe Ryan might know if unions carry into municipal, but I would think they would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a just transition is impossible off of fossil fuels without our union brothers and sisters. And we stand with them on the strike. I know that did not happen, but we stand with them there.
Right.
We want them to have more opportunities for engagement and participation under a municipal structure to ensure that more than just like contracts, other things about their material and daily needs are met, and that they're partners in this transition, not, and so Michael spoke to the very particular successor clause, and then there's things around pensions and stuff that would also, be accommodated in the New York State system. And
Well, I hope that information helps.
Thanks. We have time for 2 more questions, I hope. And the first, I want to be sure to get in because Dennis Duffy was asking you, Michael, earlier, apparently you mentioned certain savings and financial savings. Do you recall what he's referring to? Because he'd like you to get more specific about that.
I think that came up with the borrowing costs and the kind of eligibility that a public authority or a fully municipal authority would have with respect to federal assistance. So that would be the same type of answer, that there's all kinds of cost savings from that, right? A lot of firms or governments are they have costs which are the borrowing costs, right? The amount of debt that they have. Those kinds of costs are much lower for public entities, such as public authorities.
Okay.
Had one more question, Frank?
Yes. Apparently, windmills in Texas have frozen. So is that a problem that we should be concerned with here on Long Island if we invest in wind power?
No, all wind in the Northeast and in the Northern United States is winterized. In Texas, they don't winterize a lot of things. So everybody who knows, basement, or you have a faucet outside your house, a little bit about winterization, right? There are wind, there's Norwegian wind, Alaskan wind. It's just a winterization.
Got it. Okay. Well, that was very good dialogue, I think, back and forth. If there's any, we might have time for one more question. Wait. Okay. Here we go. Well, you know what? I just want to let you know there was back and forth within the chat about this answer to the question of who pays, and but what I guess is none of it really resolved it to a question for the panel. But that question, there was some dialogue back and forth within chat about whether or not it was a sufficient answer. I think though, unless we have somebody just joining now, but unless we have any other questions, Ernie, we can start the wrap up and talk about next week's meeting. And
Yes, you have
Hey,
the
Ernie,
schedule.
Ernie, if
Yes.
I could, this is Mike Deering. I posted on the chat the link to all of the documents that LIPA has put out. Ernie, I also sent you an email for a fact sheet that you can feel free to send to all your members. It provides much more detail than was presented. It contains the 30-day and 90-day reports that LIPA has put together. It links you to the options analysis that lays out what LIPA staff is looking at and what the board is looking at. And if you are interested in where the board and what the board's position or what they are doing leading up to the recommendations, I would suggest you go back and look at the last couple of special board meetings that the trustees have held specifically on this topic. So there's a lot of information out there. It's fairly clearly written. So I would urge, folks to take a look at it as the staff and the board continues to look at their options and how we're going to move forward. So
And again, I will copy those links to the Limba website. There's always a page dedicated to this specific meeting where the video will be in there in about an hour or so, and I'll include these links as well.
All right, I just wanted to mention that coming up, we have St. Joseph's College President, Dr. Boomgarden. He's going to be talking about the special programs that they have and the things that are facing colleges right now. And then we have Dr. Jordan, who's going to be talking about the Maglev. That'll be on the 19th of March. And we have on the 16th of April, we have Senator Brooks. And I'm not sure of the date, but Kathleen Rice, the congressman from Nassau County, has agreed to be coming in. I think that's going to be the April 28th or April 30th. I'm not sure. But, they're going to give me a final on that today. So thank you all for participating. This has been a very enlightening discussion. And, our programs are financed by a lot of different ways. And the last year has been a little bit hurtful for us because of the COVID pandemic. And so any donation that you make will help keep this important forum open as we go forward. Frank, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I guess I say it every week, but it's true that Limba's been around since the 70s, and it's such an important opportunity, as I think today is a perfect example for movers and shakers to answer questions and have a dialogue. And now that we've gone virtual, we don't have the breakfast meeting, which used to cover the expenses. So now we've put a link on the website, and anyone who would like to help would certainly be appreciated to make sure that we have the money needed to keep things going.
All right, I want to thank everybody for participating, especially our speaker guests. And
yes, great job. Thank you, guys.
And I want to thank Mike Deering for getting into the conversation as well, and Mr. Gumi. The way to have these meetings to work better for us is to understand the issue that we're trying to present. And I think we did a reasonably good job today. In fact, I think we did a very good job today, and I want to thank everybody for helping that happen.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on. And again, I put my contact info and other things in the chat. Like, we understand this is massively complicated. I also don't pretend to have all of the answers, so I'd love to be in ongoing communication with folks. We do a lot of statewide climate organizing work, and there's a lot of, we have a lot of investment in making sure this goes right for a lot of different constituencies of people. So always welcome engaging with more folks about this, and appreciate everyone's time.
All right.
Me too. Thanks, everybody.
Mike, I just want to let you know my son's a happy undergrad at Brooklyn College in the film program. He's enjoying it very much.
Oh, great. Great. Well, best of luck to him.
Thanks. Okay, bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Ernie. Bye, everyone.
Bye.